Derek, welcome to the show, my friend. How is it going?
It's going great. Just came back from a long day of working in school as a teacher. Loving that. Reconnecting with the kids. Haven't been a teacher for a long time, so looking forward to the show all day and getting to meet you personally. Heard a lot of good things about you from Adam, so I'm ready to rock and roll.
Hey, and likewise. And before we get started, I want to say that I don't think it's in question that you and Brett have the best intro video I've ever seen of any podcast, any show leading up to the show. I mean, it's second to none. So I just want to get that out there and just let you guys know that.
No, I totally appreciate that. We do change it every 3 months, so actually a change is coming, but we always keep it a little light. I think that's good. And it'll always be a stepsister reference in there, in case you're wondering.
Exactly. As far as the USMNT, we made a coaching change, and you and I, this is the first time we ever talked. How did you feel about the Pochettino hire when you first heard the news?
I was excited. I think at this point we needed a big name, somebody who's going to command that kind of respect as soon as they hit the locker room, and everybody knows that the expectations are going to be high. This guy's got maybe not a national team record, but he certainly coached some of the biggest teams in the world, and I think that was necessary from where we came, from whence we came. And unlike the Klinsmann hire, who, listen, I like Jurgen Klinsmann. He's German. That's an affinity I have. But Poch really has a solid record as a club manager. Yes, everybody gets it rough at PSG, but that happens. And I thought what he did with Chelsea was pretty amazing. I was surprised that he got fired, frankly. I think it's a big coup for the U.S. men's national team. I had to take my hat off. I can't call him Betty Crocker anymore. I got to call him Matt Crocker. He did a good job, and so did Batson and everybody involved in the process. And it took longer than we thought, but boy, was I happy it wasn't.
Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you give it a like down below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of my videos. I appreciate all the support. Now, back to the video.
No offense, but the LAFC coach, whom I loved as a national team player, but that's not what we need right now. Steve Trundle wouldn't be my answer.
Steve Trundle would have been an absolute disaster because I believe it would have been more of the same what we just had. We got an MLS coach. Now, Steve Trundle has won an MLS Cup, but I mean, look who he's coaching, man. I mean, he's coaching the best team in the league, or at least the best ran organization. You would have to be a total screw up to not win with that team. And hey, you can make an argument that maybe he is because he hasn't won enough with them. He's only won one cup. He's lost like 5, maybe 4 or 5 finals he's lost. He just recently won the Open Cup, which is a whole nother can of worms of what they've done to that beautiful, historic tournament. But yeah. I'm glad that they didn't go that route. I honestly thought, Derek, that they were going to I didn't know what their options were. I believed it was a desirable job, but a lot in the media like to try to downplay and say that nobody wanted this job. It was too complicated, too much pressure. They're overrated, that no big-time serious manager would want it. So I was thinking, damn, I mean, if we have to go the MLS route, at least get the best MLS manager. Don't settle. But I like I said, I believe that they could swing for the fences and get a big coach. I believe if Klopp hadn't have left Liverpool and in the fashion he did, where he didn't want to betray them and say like, "Hey, I'm retiring." Hey, just kidding, psych. I'm actually coaching the USMNT. He probably would have came here. I believe that. I think he would have been very interested. Poch would have been my second, second choice.
Right. No, I think that. You got to also understand, if Klopp would have taken, he could have had the excuses. Yeah, I'm taking another job, but coaching a national team isn't as strenuous. The schedule's not as nutso. It's not 9 months out of a year, or 10 months actually, probably more, because the off season you don't get that much of a break, maybe 3 weeks. So for him, it probably would have felt like semi-retirement to take a national team job. So he could have used that excuse, but. No, I mean, he was committed to that break from the game. But yeah, you're right. There were a lot of Eeyores out there and a lot of guys that kind of the verbiage of the narrative of what they were saying sounded very Yanks abroad, not Yanks, Yanks. If you've seen him on Twitter, which is just super negative. Like, well, who the hell would want this job? These players they're way overrated. Well, if they're so overrated, why are they doing, some of them performing so well at their clubs, albeit not the goalies? All right, not going to mess with that.
We'll get to that later. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. But I think the job was more desirable than people think. I think that Poch would have been hired as a club coach sometime soon anyhow. So this is a coup. This is a great move. They, for the first time, they walked the walk or they talked and they walked what they talked, which is, it's nice to hear. It gives you some faith in U.S. soccer. I know it's still screwed up. There are plenty of things to fix, but good positive vibes. And I'm going to give Poch all my support going forward. As I did with Greg when he was hired. I'm like, listen, wasn't my guy. I didn't really want that guy, but I'm going to support him. But, I'm going to be critical. And I'm going to say when I think he's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know if we've ever had an upgrade like this or in sports team, Greg Berhalter to Pochettino. That's like one of the craziest upgrades we've ever seen. I don't even know what else you could compare it to. But Greg,
I was going to say you can't compare it to Klinsmann, right? Because the jump from Klinsmann's club career, a national team coaching, a lot of people said, well, that's really Jurgen Love, right? He's the one who put together all the actual strategic plans and tactics to win the games. And then he went to Bayern and that was a bomb. So, and his players wrote forgot his name, the right back wrote a whole book about how horrible. Well, not the whole book wasn't about him, but there was a significant chapter of the book that said this guy doesn't know how to coach, so it's not like, you're right. This is the biggest jump we've ever made coaching wise, for sure.
Well, I will say this about Jurgen Klinsmann. I'm actually like 40 to 50% German myself. So my grandparents are 100%. So I guess I am 50%. I actually have a more favorable opinion of Jurgen Klinsmann as time goes on. I was really pissed at him in 2016. I was like, man, why the hell is this team underperforming so badly? What is going on? Where's the 2014 team that had grit and got out of that group of death? Ghana, Portugal, Germany. And maybe the voice just became stagnant and like people were just like the locker room was fed up with it. I mean, we've heard the comments about Tim Howard about not knowing how to talk to the American player, whatever the hell that means. But maybe some of the players were just tired of his voice. But I will say this, though. I think he did a lot of good in laying the groundwork for future generations, and like the payoff of what he did is like finally has shown up in the last couple of years. Like all these players, instead of sticking around MLS maybe too long or in the youth system, they're trying to get any opportunity they get. They're moving to Europe and trying to test themselves as early as they possibly can. And I think that you have to give him a lot of credit. Now, the player obviously has to be good, but the mindset has to be you have to attribute a lot of that to what Klinsmann embedded in these guys' mind at a young age.
Yeah, I mean, he even got actually there's a new what is that show code with Dempsey and Kate Abdo and Kicking It. Yeah. There's a brand new Kicking Out today with Jurgen Klinsmann, and so good time to bring this up. But I mean, he had to be faced as well with the question about not bringing Donovan, for instance, and I think that was a decision I thought didn't make any sense to me at the time either. Nor did it to the team, because Dempsey said that shook the team up. But then it all, we were still the survivor. So then we really had to pull together because we knew we were going into this without Landon. So it actually had kind of a good effect in some ways. But yeah, Jurgen Klinsmann shook things up because he's the first coach to say, hey, if you're good enough, go overseas. MLS did not like that at all. They were not happy with that. He was the first coach to say, the Camp Cupcake, I don't think we really need it. And they were like, no, you have to do it. We're contractually, bound. We have to have 2 games in January to be on TV. So no, you have to do it. And he said, okay, I'll do it. But, I don't see the season's a point to it. And a lot of good stuff from Jurgen. tactically was he always the best, but he had a good enough common sense during the World Cup to say, we're going to play sensible here. We're going to play a sensible setup. We're not going to try to dominate possession. We're going to hit on the counter. He wasn't an idiot. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
like the previous guy, right? Well,
I love Bob too, but yeah.
Well, Greg was an idiot. I think everybody.
Greg, yeah.
Greg's got the lowest approval ratings in polling numbers history, probably.
Yes.
He can't even go home some nights. But
Right.
but I just think that with Klinsmann, he just in the talent. I actually, when I had Alexi on, me and him debated this. He was trying to say Matt Beasler in 2014 is better than Chris Richards now. Like, do we know that Chris Richards is better? And I'm like, well, yeah, I think Chris Richards playing in the Premier League pretty solidly at Crystal Palace is better than 2014 Sporting Kansas City Matt Beasler. And it's not a slight at him, but it's just like the talent is definitely better now than it was a decade ago. But,
and keep in mind, Matt Beasler could have gone overseas. Both he and Zusi were offered contracts abroad. They both turned it down to take bigger money in MLS at the time. So from Kansas
but they
City.
were talented enough to definitely play. But I think that Richards definitely is probably he is a better player, but that's not a slight to Beasler. It's just the talent has elevated. And I think that the thing about Klinsmann is that he had a very good way about just getting this team to believe in themselves and just punch above their weight. And it felt like Greg did the opposite, to where we can't beat those teams we can't even beat the teams we should be beating, let alone be punching above our weight and knock out a giant. But Klinsmann, I mean, I can't even wrap my head around the fact we got out of that group stage in 2014. We can't even get out of a damn group stage with Panama, Bolivia, and Uruguay at home. But I mean, what the hell, man?
So, I mean, the thing that, you can criticize Greg about a lot of things, but what seemed to stand out outside of the fact that he played very predictable, the patterns of play were very predictable. You kind of always knew how we were going to come out and play. I think even in the last game, can't remember what the hell it was. The other coach said, it's Jesse Marsh said, we knew this was a disciple of Greg, so we knew he was going to play exactly how Greg plays. And in fact, the guy said, I didn't play exactly like Greg's plays. It was this Michael saying, Mikey said, I tried to, you didn't notice that we played it out of the back on all the goal kicks. So we did something different because Greg, he was clearing the ball out on goal kicks all the way to midfield. We weren't doing that. Well, outside of that, you still played the same patterns of play we were used to under Greg. Greg was a very predictable coach, and that's why we weren't competitive against the Netherlands. And so it was definitely a time for a change. And I don't know, based on Poch's interview today, how much difference it's going to start out with, but I think we need the belief. But Greg became too friendly with these guys. He gave them too much power with the leadership council. So I'm sure that's gone at this point. And we need somebody that the guys come in and go, all right, I respect this guy. He doesn't have to earn my respect. I just respect this guy. He's not going to be my best friend. Jurgen Klinsmann was not the best friend of all these players either. I don't think the coach needs to be the best friend of the players. He needs to hold the players accountable. And I hope that's what we're going to get with Poch, and I think we will.
Yeah, and I think what Poch is going to do, what Klinsmann did, kind of what you were alluding to, is he checks egos, right? He's checking guys' egos. He says, hey, Landon Donovan, I know you might be the greatest national team player of all time, and you're only 32, but your ass is staying home for Brazil. You're not going with us. We're taking 19-year-old Julian Green with us instead. Now, the guy wasn't even playing for the first team. I think he was playing with the Bayern reserves at that time. I don't think he ever cracked with the first team Bayern. Maybe he had an appearance or two. But either way, leaving your legendary player at home for an unproven player, it literally, like you said, had everybody's head on a swivel. Greg didn't do that. It was a totally different demeanor, totally different environment. I think Poch is going to do that, and I hope he does knock some heads and shake a couple things up. You said you didn't know how different it was going to be heading into this camp, like what the style is going to be. But I think people just need to limit their expectations. It's going to take time. Sure. If we win 5-0 against Mexico, we should have the same reaction as if we lose, 1-0 or something. Like this is all about building. We have to temper expectations.
Yeah, I think he even said it today. Pot's like, listen, I'm not going to come up and just shake up everything, and I'm not going to come in and create chaos. That's why you're seeing a lot of the same faces and the same names. I want to start, from a base, and then we'll build from there. I mean, he didn't say that exactly because, his English is, it's about 70% there. So some of the words he uses you have to interpret. But yeah, I think that's why we're seeing some of the same names, some of the same people. There are some changes and some inclusions that I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, it's a good start from Poach, and I didn't know if people were expecting some massive, change. I didn't. We did a show, last week where we tried to predict Poach's, 23, which ends up being a 25, at least for camp. We mostly got it right. So it's not a big. The only debate we had was Maloney versus Morris. Who do you bring? And we were going, man, maybe Maloney. We were almost flipped a coin on it. We weren't sure. So
were you not surprised that Tanner Tessman didn't get a call up?
I really was, in the sense that Busio got a call up over Tanner Tessman, in the sense that if you go back and watch Venezia's season last season, you ask yourself who was the most important player on that team. It was certainly Tessman. And so that was a little bit of shocker. They're different players. Like Busio can move the ball forward more, and maybe that's what he's looking for. Maybe he's okay, having Johnny there as his and Aiden Morris. That was good enough for him. But yeah, to not see Tessman over Aiden Morris, maybe a little surprising. But then again, maybe they had that conversation that you often have with players. Listen, coach, I just got here. I'd like to continue to settle in here. Or it was like, listen, Tanner, you just got there. You just got to Leon. Why don't you settle in, gain a starting spot? You just started last game. Why don't you continue that and work on that and stay healthy? And, there's plenty time, plenty of opportunities going forward. Maybe that's the conversation that happened.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the goalkeepers, like how it's just an absolute train wreck, right?
Right.
And I was surprised to see Ethan get a call up, honestly, because I feel like we've seen enough with him. There's not much left. I think he can't be the number one. And at this point, I don't even think he's number two. He was terrible in Copa America. I don't think he's good. I think we need to move off of that. Now Zach Steffen was a little. I mean, I wasn't totally surprised. He's had a decent season in MLS this year. I think this is a crazy thing. I didn't even realize this, Derek. At one point, and not just like after the first game, Zach Steffen was statistically the worst goalkeeper in MLS.
He was, yeah.
So, and I mean, if you watch the game, he doesn't really show up like that. But statistically, he hasn't been very good this year. And then obviously you have Patrick Schulte, and I lost track of the last name. I'm trying to think who the fourth goalkeeper was.
Schulte, Horvath, Turner, and Steffen.
Turner. Okay, so Matt Turner. Okay, it was Matt Turner. Yeah, I just that is like that well is dry. Like that is not looking good.
It's the gloomiest we've ever had it at goalkeeper for most of my adult lifetime. But Ethan Horvath is now riding pine. We used to have preparation H jokes about Ethan Horvath because he rode so much pine wherever he went. And here he is right back to doing it. He played horrible, I think, or very mediocre for Cardiff when he got the chance. And Zach Steffen, as you said, has had, I think, a fairly average to poor season in MLS, but he had a great Leagues Cup. But Poach did mention in the interview today, he remembered Zach Steffen from his time playing him in cup games when Zach Steffen was the backup at Man City, and he thought pretty highly of him at the time. And he didn't say this, but I think that of the goalkeepers that we brought, Zach Steffen is probably the most competent with his feet, and that's probably why he's there. Even though his shot stopping's gone to hell, I don't know what happened there, but you could say that about Matt Turner. You could say that about Ethan Horvath. Their shot stopping's gone to hell too. Patrick Schulte, not so good with his feet, but at least he's shot stopping. So there you go.
Well, and also too, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, this is normally our like the linchpin of USMNT history is the goalkeeper. It's always been good. Friedel, Keller, Howard, Guzan was decent at one time. I mean, obviously that was a long time ago, but there was always a competent replacement, and there's just been a gaping hole. And how the hell do we go from having our goalkeeper normally being a starter in the Premier League? Literally every guy I just named was a starter for a Premier League team at one time. To now we're backup goalkeeper like that's all of our goalkeepers are the backup somewhere. And if they're not backing up, they're in MLS.
Yeah, we used to have Miola too before that. And then even there was a guy started with an H, Marcus Henneman, who played for years in the championship and then the Premier League, who could never make a team because, there were just too many good goalkeepers. So he ended his career in MLS. But, a guy right now, Marcus Henneman, I'd take that guy in a hard second. Of course, the way the game is played has changed. I mean, could Friedel or a lot of the goalkeepers, the back in the day who were great shot stoppers, play it with their feet out of the back? No. So the requirements have changed for sure, but we don't have anybody remotely close right now to being that super confident with their feet, except for Cochin, who is a child, basically, in goalkeeper terms. So we've got some time to wait on him to develop. And Slonina has showed that one of his weaknesses right now is with his feet. So it's something everybody needs to work on. But listen, at some point, and I always say this, you can get better with being a better technical player. But once you're like 24, 25, you're probably not going to get that much better technically, whether you're an outfield player or a goalkeeper. You're probably going to maybe have a better soccer IQ. You can build that. You can understand the game tactically better. But getting technically better beyond the age 24, 25 is just incremental, such small microscopic increments. It's barely almost noticeable to most people.
Yeah, and I thought Gaga would be better. Now, obviously, he's in Chelsea loan army hell, which has gotten a lot of our players, right?
Yeah.
So that's sad to see. But he's only 20 years old, so I mean, he still has time. But I mean, I think that a lot of people would have believed by 26 he would have been at least a lock to be one of the 3 goalkeepers that would go. Now, I'm not saying definitively starting, but maybe number 2, number 3, and it doesn't look like that's anywhere close to happening at this point. So that's
he certainly thinks so. He was on a show recently where he said, my goal is still 2026. Now, whether or not that's going to really happen is going to be dependent on me and how hard I work and how much I improve. But that's the goal. It may be an unrealistic goal. I think this was on Jimmy Conrad's show, but that's what I'm shooting for. So we'll see. There's a lot of positives with Slonina. I mean, he's a good shot stopper. He's got cat-like reflexes, but sometimes he's still making silly mistakes here at Barnsley. At the beginning of the season, he's made some pretty egregious errors. So we'll see.
I think a lot of our guys are lacking confidence right now, and I want to transition to the back line, right?
Right.
Tim Ream is like the damn USMNT Iron Man at this point. I mean, you can't shake this guy. He just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Are you surprised to give him that they called him in? I mean, obviously it helps with the MLS. I mean, he's here. That probably does help. He's a veteran. He's a leader of this team. Maybe, like you said, maybe Poch didn't want to check too many people, kind of keep like the core. And I would say, even though he's not wearing the captain's armband, he's definitely one of the leaders, or he has been the last couple of years. But are you surprised to not give another opportunity to someone else, especially since he's 37? And if he's starting for us, Derek, in 2026, we are screwed, man. Like if he's starting in 2026, we are royally screwed.
Yeah, I think the problem is, I mean, we haven't had a whole lot of young guys on the rise. Like maybe Jalen Neal, you can talk about, but boy, as far as CB years, he's a youngster still. He's not playing, every game great so far in MLS. And then you got injuries. You got CCV, who's injured. You got Richards, who's out with an injury. So, because we know Richards is in this, right? And so that means somebody's got to go, probably Trusty. Because if you watch Trusty play Champions League for Celtic not too long ago, boy, he was pretty poor. He was horrible. I think they lost 7-1, and he was part of the problem. There was no doubt about it. And what a sideways move that was. Actually, it was a move in the wrong direction. I would rather have watched Trusty play in the championship a full another season than going to play for Celtic, where he plays 1 or 2 hard games a season, or say maybe 3 or 4 if you count whoever besides Rangers and Celtic shows up to play. Some years it's Motherwell, some years it's Hearts, etc. You fill in the blank there. So for me, that was not. I was hoping that CCV would go to the championship. Like, he needs to move out of Celtic. It's too easy. It's just too easy. 80% of the games are, they're going to crush it. Celtic barely has to play defense because they're totally dominating all the games. It's not like you're getting a test. So CCV out injured, Richards out injured. Not surprised to have Ream back simply because he may not start. I think he probably will, though, because he's the only player we have that can play. That's not totally true. McKenzie showed he could do some stuff. He in the last friendlies, like he could make a switching fields pass. He could bring the ball up and distribute. So that was promising for McKenzie. I'm really was happy to see that. But outside of that, you could say Brooks, but Brooks is injured as well, and Brooks is playing in 2 Bundesliga if he ever gets to play because he's still injured. So I imagine he'll be a starter once he gets healthy, but he's not available either. And I don't think he's really in anybody's picture until he's not only starts to play, but starts to, maybe their teams in the top 2 or 3, 2 Bundesliga teams, then maybe he gets a peak because center back is such another very thin position for us right now. Very thin.
It's like a lot of positions, though. It's like talent's there, but these guys are just fringe players. They just can't figure it out. They can't take the next step, or they can't play consistently enough. Chris Richards had a great season at Crystal Palace last year.
Yep.
That was not the same guy that we saw this summer. I don't know who the hell that was. Body double, maybe? I don't know. But it wasn't the same guy.
Or at Crystal Palace this season. Same problem.
Yes, exactly. And it's a shame because we know how talented he is. And we have to have players like that show up for us. We have to have at least 2 competent, reliable center backs. We have to. Or we're never going to have a chance.
That's why it kills me, by the way, when they say, let's play 3 in the back. I'm like, 3 center backs in the back? So you're going to play 3 at one of our thinnest, weakest positions. Now we're going to play 3 center backs? Unless you're going to throw Tanner Testament in there as a center back, or maybe you're going to try Maloney as a center back, which we should do, by the way, because that was Maloney's first position before he ended up as a CDM, which, by the way, he basically plays as another center back for that team. If you watch how deep he plays like 5 yards in front of the 2 center backs. But apparently that's not something we're going to try. It's a thin position. So I would even recommend trying something like that. Bring a Maloney into camp and try him at center back because he's obviously a great defender. Is he a great distributor? No. But if you need some guy to defend and cut off angles and who has a massive soccer IQ and knows where to put his tush at all times, that's Leonard Maloney. Tanner Testament probably wouldn't be happy to move back to center back, honestly. I mean, it would take some talking for him to do it. He'd probably do it. But Maloney, that's a much easier natural switch for him.
Yeah, and also, too, you brought up a good point about playing with their feet, right? And that's been one of the criticisms of Miles Robinson. A lot of reason why a lot of people don't want him to play, on top of him being an MLS player too. I think at this point, that was, I think, one of the biggest sticking points for Greg is if you couldn't do something, he wasn't going to play you. Like, you weren't going to get significant minutes. But do you think we should get back to the basics, like you just said? Kind of, I mean, think about all of our good teams. They may have not done everything well, but the one thing they did do, they did very well. Like, as long as Miles Robinson's a competent defender, he's not leaking goals. At the end of the day, doesn't that matter more than if a guy can pass the ball a little bit better out with his feet?
I would agree with both center back and goalkeeper at this point. What you're just looking for are really good defenders and a really solid shot stopper at this point, because we're obviously not going to get, barring the fact that Tim Ream can play another 2 years, which I don't think he can at that level. He's already showing signs that he can't. And just live with the fact that center backs are not going to be distributing the ball at the back. They're going to have to find a competent center midfielder who's going to drop back, receive the ball, and they play it out of the back. Now, obviously, would you like to have a center back who's got the threat of making a switching fields pass down the line? Yes, you would. That's why Tim Ream was called to the team in the first place. But if Tim Ream can't hold up, by the way, John Brooks can do that too. I mean, he can hit a gnat on a dime, from 50 yards. No problem with his left foot, not his right, but his left. And so would it be great if we had a fully fit John Brooks and a guy that was playing in the Bundesliga for a good team? That would be great, but it's not happening. So now we're going to have to live with the idea right now that we probably are going to start McKenzie and maybe Ream. I don't know. I don't think it'll be Trusty. I would be shocked if it were Miles Robinson, but what do I know? But I think that's why you see Miles Robinson here. I mean, you can't bring in EPB. He hasn't played for a year and a half. Just not a whole lot of options unless you open your mind a little and go, well, what about Leonard Maloney as a center back? He played that position for years in his youth and along with, as well as with the Dortmund 2 team before he moved to Heidenheim. Why don't we try him there? But nobody apparently thought of that.
Well, hey, maybe Poch will. It'll be interesting to see what he does. Maybe he's got a different perspective than all of us. I'm so excited to see. I'm excited. I mean, I don't expect the starting 11 to really shake anybody to their core, but it'll be interesting I think the second game is where we'll really see maybe him implement or maybe try some things a little different than the first game. Now, moving to the midfield, we talked about Tessman, Lucio getting the call over him, or maybe I'm trying to remember who you said you thought maybe got the call over him.
Morris.
Yes, Aiden Morris. Yep. Aiden Morris, yes. Yep. This midfield looks pretty damn similar to what we were accustomed to. Now, I am a little shocked about McKennie. I mean, I think McKennie has just had a terrible last 4 months, man, or 3 months. It's been pretty bad. And I don't know what you were saying about this at the time. A lot of people were upset saying that he didn't look fit. He looked checked out. He was too worried about what's going on after the game than during the game. Yep. Now that's a guy that I think that Poch really needs to knock his head and really put him on notice and saying, hey man, what's been going on is not going to be reoccurring here. If you don't live up to this standard, you're not getting called up.
Here's the good news for McKennie though. Juventus gave him that knock in the head. They basically said, we don't want you. We're trying to get rid of you. And yet he's now started in the last 3 games in a row for Juventus, played very well, played great today, by the way, as well, for Juventus and he went 90 minutes today in their Champions League game. McKennie's back. He took off that 15 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever it was. That was that paunch underneath his rib cage. So that's gone. He's working harder than ever. And I'm willing to give a guy like McKennie, who had to work his ass back onto the starting lineup for Juventus. And now, the coach is saying he's an everyday starter for us. And so I think he's changed the narrative really quickly. And outside of the fact, he's overcome the fact that the team said, we don't want you. And he said, no, I'm going to stick around and I'm staying here and I'm going to win a starting spot. And he's already done it. He's started.
But do you think history's repeating itself though? Because last year, didn't the same thing happen? They gave away his locker, his parking spot, took his number from him. He had the best season of his career, in my opinion, at Juve. And then going into Copa, I think all of us were excited to see what would happen. And then whatever the hell that was is what we got. I just don't want that to be the trend where the league play is where his focus is. And then when the summer comes and the big tournaments, it's vacation time.
I hope I agree. I hope that's not the case. And it is a discipline issue with McKennie. Obviously, the last 2 games of the season, I believe last year, Juventus, this is during when he was in talks, where his agent was in talks. And they were asking for money that just wasn't going to happen. Juve just doesn't have that kind of cash laying around. And they thought it was absurd. They were actually offended by the fact that he asked for that much money. He wanted a raise. And they're like, we can't afford it. So now we're pissed at you and we're going to bench you for the last 2 games of the season because your agent and you are making absurd requests. And they did. And he kind of lost interest or got depressed. I don't know what it is, but he ate a lot of food and he got way out of shape. And when he came to play for us, he was way gone. And, it was so obvious how overweight he was that during that commercial, they, kept the shot above his right about nipples and on up, right? They didn't want to show.
He's big boned, man. He's big boned.
I know. We got that all the time. Yes, I know. But from his dad and we of course, his friend who comes on our show, 29, not for a while, but back in the day, he's big bone. Okay, but if it's obvious to us and it's obvious to everybody watching that he's about 15 pounds overweight, then it's true. It's just true. So he's pulled his crap back together, to give him credit. Played great today. Played 2 great games before that. So he's back. I don't know. I hope it's not a pattern. I hope you're right. I hope it's not a pattern.
Yeah, and I agree. And listen, the good news is Pochettino, based on everything we know about him as a coach, will take notice, hold people accountable. And if that happens again, I think that's when it's gonna, he's gonna be held accountable and maybe lose his spot in the starting 11, or maybe even lose his spot on the roster. Now, this is where it gets interesting moving to the forwards. Okay. Pulisic right now is playing the best football, I think, of his career. I said the other day that I think he's the top 25 player in the world right now. Got a lot of flack for that. Not saying, Derek, I don't think that he's the 25th best player in the world talent-wise. I think there's a lot more players more talented than him. But it's like power rankings. It's about who's hot right now, right? I think it would be hard for anybody to find 25 players that are playing better football this minute than Christian Pulisic.
I guess if you put it that way, I could see that. Because certainly Leao, at least based on history, is supposedly a better, more talented player. But what I've been watching so far in the AC Milan game is that Pulisic's just as good as Leao, if not in many games, better than Leao. And, Leao's considered one of the best players in the world. If I did the math, would Pulisic come out to be like if you add in all the positions, I can't say he's a top 25. I'd say he's probably like, I don't know. I don't know what the number is, but it seems like if you add in goalkeepers, all the world-class goalkeepers, you add in all the world-class CBs, then it gets harder to say, okay, he's the top 25. But if you're just talking at his position, I'd say absolutely he is right now a top 25 winger in the world. Right now, the way he's playing.
Oh, I'd get crazier with it. I would honestly get crazier.
I know you would.
If we're talking winger, right? If we're talking winger, I mean, I in the world right now, power rankings, I'm thinking top 5, top 10 in the world right now. If we're talking winger, I think he's got to be top 5. He's on pace right now, Derek, to win Serie A Footballer of the Year. Now, I don't know how you rank the leagues in the world at this point, because it always changes. It depends on who's up and who's down. But me personally, I have Serie A probably as the second best league in the world. It's close to the Bundesliga for second. I would have those probably like close to a tie, but I think I'd give the edge to Serie A. And if you're winning the best footballer in the league, in the second best league in the world, it's pretty damn impressive. And that means you're doing really well. Now, obviously, it's early. There's 6 games out of 38, 16%. It's all about power rankings, man. It can fluctuate, right? But going into this camp, I don't think we've ever seen a better version of Christian Pulisic.
I'd agree with that for sure. The only reason I'm pushing back even a little is because I think if I sat down and I went, okay, give me the roster of Manchester City. And I'm like, okay, he's better than Pulisic. He's played better than Pulisic. Well, so is he. So, you know what I'm saying? If I get really into the details, I'm thinking, is he going to end up at 25? If I do that and I put in Liverpool, and then I put in the 2 guys from Chelsea who don't suck, and and I'm starting to add it up, right? That's all I'm saying, right? I don't know if I could. He's going to fit in that 25, but that's on a more grand scale. But if you're just talking about who's the hottest, who are some of the hottest players right now, I have to agree with you. Right now, he's probably one of the top 25 hottest soccer players, footballers in the world right now, for sure. I hope you're right. I hope it continues. I hope we don't have one of those Pulisic slumps where, he's on fire for 4 or 5 games, and then this time it's been longer, obviously, and then he has like a 4-game slump. And then, we don't see much from him because guys don't pass him the ball, which always irritates the hell out of me when I watch AC Milan, because he's often more open than people think. Nobody passes him the ball. So,
or his kryptonite of getting injured when he has a good spell. That's another thing. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at AC Milan. So cross your fingers. Yes, exactly. I feel pretty good about it. I'm excited, and people I think people forget this too, because he's been on the scene for so long. It's been a decade almost that he's been on the scene. He's only 25 or 26 years old. He's still very young. Not to say, like you were saying about development, about getting tactically or technically better at that age, and it's very few and far between after 24, is what you said earlier. But I think that he has always been this level. We just haven't seen it because of injuries or this or that or Chelsea's disaster, whatever the hell it may be. So this is a good fit to showcase what he can do. He can stay healthy. We're seeing the best version of Pulisic, and I'm not overrating him because he's a national team player for the U.S. I'm being honest. I think, if anything, people are underrating him because he's an American. I think it's actually the opposite right now.
I think that would be fair. He didn't even make the top 100 list after last season in the Guardian's top 100.
Now, what if he was Brazilian or English or Spanish? I mean, I think the narrative would be different.
I think so. There's always been that. I mean, I've had to deal with it for years, watching American players play overseas. I watched Dempsey have to, I'm a longtime Fulham supporter, and having to watch him have to reclaim the starting spot over and over and over again every time they got a new manager. So it's out there. There's no doubt. And if you're talking about the English, whereas in Germany, I think American players are more comfortable with American players. They're like, Americans, they work hard. They're tough guys. They're tough players. In England, there's still that, hey, this is our sport kind of thing going on. Less and less, but it's still there, underlying, but still under there somewhere, especially with the media.
Lacking respect. Yes, exactly. Now, we have our 3 promising, exciting strikers, and this is another position, like I said earlier. It feels like this is every position we have. All these talented players on the fringe of being something special, but we just haven't seen it all put together. Now, Ballo has obviously had his one good season at Reims, was spectacular. Didn't really look like that at Monaco. Pepe has kind of, his European journey has kind of been weird. I mean, he looks like he's starting to get a little bit more time at PSV. And I think that when he does get the opportunity to be the full-time starter, things could really open up for him. We've seen how good he is. I remember watching him at Dallas and thinking, damn, this kid is special. He's only 18 years old and he's scoring 16 goals in MLS. That's something different. And then obviously Josh Sargent. I'll have to preface this. I haven't always been a Josh Sargent believer, honestly. I thought that maybe he wasn't producing enough in the championship, but I would say he's quickly shut me down, and he's been playing out of his mind the last couple years at least. I think that he's got a serious argument about that, about starting, right?
I think he does. A lot of people don't think so, but then you got to wait to see how Poch lines him up and how he plays. I think Sargent in Greg's system was a better fit for Greg's system than Balogun. Balogun's a between the lines, speedster, and Sargent's the kind of guy who can hold up the ball and pass the ball and develop. So they're totally 2 different players. So comparing them it's not even close. And then if you're asking for somebody to finish in the box with as much crossing as we did with Greg, then that's obviously going to be Sargent, because Balogun's not getting his head on anything and scoring. All right. That's more likely to be Sargent. Or Pepe, actually, in the box is going to get a header in for you or get up there in the air, as he just did not long ago, a few days ago, or it was a couple days ago. So, yeah, it just depends. That's why even Greg lamented, like, we haven't really figured out how to fit him into the squad and the way we play. And Balogun was obviously frustrated playing under Greg's system. So we'll see how that goes. Oh, by the way, for the Reims thing, it's actually Reims. It's just, you got to have you have to have a little mucus.
I would try it. I don't know if I can with my throat now. I'm not going to attempt that. I'm gonna stick to the Americanized Reims, right? But next time we do a show or something other, I'm gonna try to pronounce that correctly.
Don't worry about it. By the way, we mispronounce shit on the show all the time. That was my first curse word. And,
no, you're good. You're good.
And by the way, Pete was pronouncing Westerlo for at least 6 months. Even after I called him, he was on a show and I corrected him, and then he forgot about it, so he kept doing it. So I mean, it's so easy to do. It's Westerlo. He was saying Westerlo. I was like, no, there's this battle called Westerlo, and it's got 2 O's. Westerlo only has 1 O. It's Westerlo, not Westerlo. Anyhow, he finally caught on. He's got it now. I always try to get it as correct as I can. It's hard, man. There's just so many different names, pronunciations. They say it this way, you say it that way. But I feel pretty good about this roster overall. I know it's not gonna make anybody turn their heads or anything. They're not like, oh, he's there, But I'm just more excited about seeing Poch, seeing what it looks like, and like I said before, keep expectations low. You're not going to see anything too crazy, and even if you do,
Don't make that the expectation. But one thing I will say too, Derek, as we're wrapping this up,
Yep,
we will finally get our answer. For years, people debated: is it Berhalter? Is it the players? Which one is underperforming? Now, to be fair, it's both, but I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think the coach was probably the reason the players were underperforming.
right.
Now we have a very good coach. We are going to get all the answers we've been asking over the last 6 years. And one way or the other, it's going to be a sense of relief to finally know what the hell is going on.
So I once had a great conversation with a coach at a high level who told me the following thing. If there are 1, 2, 3 players playing bad during a game, it's probably the players. If the whole team stinks, it's usually the coach. So in Berhalter's case, we had a lot of the whole team stinks. That's a lot of times where we had whole team sucks. How can that be possible? How could everybody be having a bad game? That's usually on the manager, not on the players. So I think we're going to get to see that. I don't think we're going to get to see that out of the box, by the way. That's why I'm glad you're telling people to calm the hell down, because like they're just going to meet. Poach was saying in his interview, the only player he's met in person so far and talked to is Jedi. So this is it. And he only happened to run into him at a dinner for old Tottenham players that he knew. And he happened to be there for whatever odd reason. And so so he's only met with one player. They're going to all be meeting him for the first time. We don't know how, that's all going to go down. Don't expect miracles right away. It's going to take time. These are friendlies. They're going to allow him to kind of see who he's got, find out who they are, and decide how they're going to fit into, as he put it, either my 4-2-3-1 or my 4-3-3. Apparently, those are the only 2 formations he wants to play. So there you go.
I'm excited. I can't wait for these games to happen and see what it looks like. Derek, this has been a pleasure, man. I've had a good time.
Same here.
Glad we got to finally link up. Before we head out, where can the good people follow you, and tell them about your channel?
Yeah, they just need to go look up the Straight Red Card on YouTube. You will find us. I know there's another at the Straight Red Card. I don't know what that is, but we're the only soccer one. And then let's see, what's the it's at Straight Red, I believe. That's Brett. I don't reply to that. You can find me there as at Boomer Richey. That's Brett. He made my X page for me, and he called me at Boomer Richey. I'm not a boomer, by the way. I'm X, Gen X. My parents are boomers, but I'm not that old. But people like making jokes about how old I am. But yeah, you can find us. Just go Google us. You'll find us.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to put a link to your channel in the description below so people can check you out. Check you out there. Derek, it's been a pleasure, my friend. We'll see what happens. Look forward to linking up again in the near future. Appreciate you all for watching. Until next time, guys. I will see you all.
Watch this guy. Oh, no, watch this guy.
I appreciate it. Until next time, guys. I will see you all soon.
Later.